We just saw another X-class flare from the Sun. This time, it was an X-class 4, zero flare. And this is the fourth X-class flare we have seen in a few days, all coming from this same sunspot group, i.e. X-class flares 1, 2, 2, and 5. All three of these flares ejected large amounts of material towards the Earth. They hit us. The negative G4 to G5 seismic storm was over. The auroras even appeared in Mexico and Spain. This storm was quite intense. Now we see this new X-class 4, zero flare, and it only has a very small component towards the Earth. With the shock front, it looks like the majority of the plasma will erupt before Earth orbit. What's interesting, and perhaps the bigger story all along, is that all of this month's solar activity seems to strangely coincide with the orbits of strange objects and comets that are passing close to the solar system. 3 comets, Atlas 13, Atlas A, 6, Lemon, and especially Atlas T1, are all making close approaches to the Sun. Atlas 3I passes perihelion on October 29, Atlas A6 Lemon on November 7 to 8, and Atlas T1 will reach perihelion on December 3. Curiously, at the exact time each of these comets has made close approaches to the Sun, we've seen powerful flares, creating a series of spikes in solar activity that seem inexplicably linked. In fact, the current sunspot cluster formed more than a month ago on the far side of Earth, just as A6 Lemon and T1 Atlas were approaching the Sun. But the sunspots were not yet large enough to produce major flares. It wasn't until it rotated into a line with 3I Atlas on October 21 that the flare activity really began. After the next rotation, when the sunspot cluster returned to a tight line with A6 Lemon and T1 Atlas, it erupted again in a series of large flares, leading to the violent geomagnetic storm we have recorded. Now, with the Sun back in line with Atlas, 3I just 15-20 degrees from the right angle, the sunspot cluster is showing signs of waking up after a few days of silence since the X5 Uno Flare. To scientists, it may just be a coincidence of space dynamics, but to conspiracy theorists, the repeated alignment of mysterious comets and solar flares raises the question: is there a complex gravitational mechanism or some other yet to be understood factor that links these phenomena? We can only wait and see if T1 Atlas responds with another flare when it reaches perihelion in early December. Stay tuned, because what happens next will blow your mind if you are fascinated by the mystery of 3I Atlas and want to see more amazing cosmic stories. Hit that like button and let the universe know you are watching. Every click helps keep the quest for the unknown alive. Comment below and let me know where you are watching this video from. I want to see what corners of the world are witnessing this along with me. It will be especially noteworthy if the solar flares continue until November 17 and 18, because shortly afterward, around November 19 and 20, a rare planetary configuration will occur that coincides with a new moon. At that time, the Sun, Mercury, Moon, Earth, and Uranus will be almost on the same axis with a deviation of only about 2 degrees. This is Mercury's inferior conjunction when the Sun, Mercury, and Earth align. At the same time, the Moon will reach its furthest new moon position in its orbit, a super new moon, and Uranus will enter perfect opposition when the planet is at its brightest, like a full moon in its own right. This combination of factors creates a rare planetary pattern with many resonance configurations spread across the solar system, from the rhythmic interaction between Saturn and Neptune, during the near-synapse phase of the major solar cycle to the subtle connections between Pluto, Jupiter, and Venus, it seems that this enhanced energy has stirred up interplanetary space, evident in a series of powerful solar flares, most notably the X4 zero event that caused R3 radio interference across Asia, Europe, and especially Africa, where the southern hemisphere is tilted more towards the sun. What's remarkable is that the recent series of flares has occurred on a remarkable clockwork, with each one about 3 hours apart UTC, specifically at 7:30 UTC on November 9, 9:10 UTC on November 10, 10:04 UTC on November 11 for X5R, and 8:30 UTC on November 14. 4 times in a row, the same part of the Earth was facing the sun at the exact moment the energy was released. This regularity raises the question of whether it's simply astronomical coincidence or reflects some kind of cosmic rhythm that's not yet understood. In this context, seismic activity, such as the earthquake in Japan, is also being monitored in parallel with the increase in space weather volatility the rest of November, following the planetary alignments in December and early January, forecasts many notable developments. In particular, January 9 will mark a near-perfect alignment of Jupiter, Earth, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, a configuration rarely seen in decades. These factors, along with detailed analysis of the space weather associated with the X4 zero outbreak, will contribute to clarifying the dynamic picture that is changing dramatically across the solar system. The striking thing about the X4 zero explosion was its initial ferocity. The proton flux spiked immediately, accompanied by high-energy protons, alpha particles, electrons, and supercharged ions traveling close to the speed of light. When the entire particle spectrum spikes in unison, it is a hallmark of a super powerful explosion. The Earth's good magnetic connection to the sun makes this effect even more pronounced. The 3 previous explosions, all directed directly at Earth, carried enormous energies, with one burst exceeding 500 MeV of proton flux. X-ray data show a series of flares, including X1, X1R, X5, 1, and the latest X4, Ling, one of the most powerful of the current solar cycle. The question is whether this period of intense activity will continue. The previous period of quiet coincided with a sunspot group temporarily losing magnetic connection with Comet T1 Atlas. But as it approached the possibility of re-engagement with Comet 3, I-Atlas, activity flared again, resulting in the X4 zero event. This suggests that Atlas 3I's window of activity may be longer than previously thought. The mystery is compounded by the origins of 3I Atlas, an object that may have come from another star system or even a distant galaxy. Based on the unusual oscillation frequencies and resonances it exhibits, Atlas 3I is still very close to the Sun after perihelion and has begun to grow its tail again, making it particularly susceptible to solar storms. Such powerful energy sweeps can alter the structure, orbit, or composition of an interstellar object in unpredictable ways. We don't know what will happen to this extrasolar visitor if it is directly impacted during the Sun's most active phase. Time-lapse images of the X4 zero eruption show that much of the plasma was deflected away from Earth, although a halo still suggests that the shock wave may have reached our planet The expected intensity was only G1 to G2, geomagnetic storm levels possibly G2. If magnetic coupling conditions were favorable, however, most of the ejecta skimmed the Earth's flanks rather than hitting it head-on. Based on real-time stereoscopic images, the CME was located approximately 30 degrees in front of Earth. In its orbit, and even from this angle, its path was tilted predominantly westward. Although the CME originated from the opposite hemisphere, its trajectory showed a tendency to tilt toward the edge, a detail that fits well with the Atlas. 3I scenario, time-lapse images of the X4. Zero eruption show that much of the plasma was deflected away from Earth, although a halo still suggests that the shock wave may have reached our planet. The expected intensity was only G1 to G2, geomagnetic storm levels possibly G2. If magnetic coupling conditions were favorable, however, most of the ejecta skimmed the Earth's flanks rather than hitting it head-on. Stereo A images, however, suggests that the plasma may have extended further than predicted, and the device is expected to experience an increase in velocity and density as the CME passes by. This confirms that the launch was not headed toward Earth. Therefore, we may only experience a short, high-speed shock that would be unlikely to generate a storm stronger than a G2, enough to cause an aurora without causing significant damage. Direct observations from space, including from the CCR-1 and Stereo A observatories, showed that the CME was moving in the exact direction that coincided with the Atlas 3I position. NOAA's space weather model also simulates a launch deflection in the same direction, though the model doesn't extend beyond 90 degrees. In coronagraph mode, we can track any solar storms or plasma jets heading towards or away from Earth. In view 131, the Earth-facing flares are clearly visible, along with the sunspot group heading directly towards us. As time moves forward, the sunspot group moves away from the sun and then back towards it. At every point in time, a vector arrow marks the direction the sunspot group is growing. And throughout, the vector always matches the location of the magnetic instability. This is the epicenter that started the burst, and over time, this area has grown into a large, complex, and highly active sunspot region. In the early stages, the sunspot cluster is at position 0, meaning it is pointing straight at Earth, and the vector always represents the exact angle outward. When looking at the layout of the solar system during that time, comets T1, Atlas, and A6, Lemon can be seen lying above the ecliptic, well off the standard orbit. This elevation is difficult to see from an aerial perspective, but both are in the northern hemisphere of the solar system, significantly above the equatorial plane. Meanwhile, Comet 3, I-Atlas, is outside the orbit of Earth, but in the orbit of Mars, just slightly above the ecliptic and almost coincident with the intersection of the ecliptic. An important point is that when Comet A6 Lemon and T1 Atlas were still close together, solar activity was not strong. The sunspot group was still in its development stage, not yet energetic enough to cause a major flare. Only when it approached Comet 3 I-Atlas did the activity increase significantly. One of the clear peaks occurred on October 21, right at the time of the alignment of Comet Earth, 3I Atlas. And shortly after, a strong flare, accompanied by a CME, appeared on the same day. Some scientists say this is just an orbital coincidence. But for those interested in the subtle patterns of interaction in astronomy, These near-perfect matches raise the question, is there some subtle form of gravitational resonance or magnetic interaction between interstellar objects and solar activity that science has yet to detect? As the sunspot group began to grow, small flares continued to appear, and on October 21, they flared into their first major outburst at perihelion on October 29. Activity spiked with a series of flares, then died down for a few days. But as the sunspot group returned to alignment with Comet A6 Lemon, a new series of flares occurred. Then, as it returned to alignment with Comet T1 Atlas, a major outburst occurred. This pattern repeated itself in a distinct rhythm through late October and early November. During the close proximity of comets A6 Lemon and T1 Atlas, the sunspot group was so young that it only produced M-class flares with almost no CMEs. Only as the comet approached 3, I-Atlas did the flare activity increase significantly. The rewind data show that the October 21 flare in CME occurred just as the sunspot group was facing the sun close enough to 3 I-Atlas to create a significant interaction. Even if it was not perfectly aligned, this high level of activity lasted until 3 I-Atlas perihelion on October 29, when flare activity peaked, only to subside around November 3. Also on November 3, another flare occurred, just as Comet A6 Lemon was in line with the sun. After a brief lull, the sun emitted another X-class burst on November 9, as the sunspot group headed directly toward Earth and T1 Atlas. The planetary positions also contributed to the resonance. On October 21, Venus was nearly aligned. On November 3, Mercury aligned with A6 Lemon and 3 flares, X1, C, X1, R, and X5, E, followed when Earth and T1 Atlas aligned with the sunspot group. Most recently, an X4, 0 appeared in a nearly identical configuration as 3, I-Atlas approached a perpendicular position to Earth, a position sensitive to strong solar activity. On its current trajectory, 3, I-Atlas will make its closest approach to Earth on December 19. Prior to this, the sun is showing increased activity in the region of space through which 3 I-Atlas will pass. Meanwhile, November 19 and 20 will see an important planetary geometry event amid a particularly unusual situation in the solar system. Analysis of celestial positions shows that Mercury is approaching its lower conjunction with the sun, or quasi-mi-fase, while the moon enters a new moon phase and becomes a supermoon at its furthest point in its orbit, very close to Mercury, in the ecliptic. This configuration creates a rare alignment between the sun, Mercury, moon, and Earth. As the range widens, Uranus will also enter opposition to the sun and Earth, creating 3 coincident events at the same time. This is just part of a larger geometry this month. Saturn and Neptune are in heliocentric conjunction, a rare phase in a 37-year cycle. Uranus and Pluto form nearly 60-degree angles to the Saturn-Neptune pair, contributing to a very special resonance. The November 20 conjunction of Uranus, Earth, Moon, Mercury, and the Sun is the highlight of the pattern. This configuration can be accompanied by unpredictable changes from increased solar activity, geomagnetic storms, seismic fluctuations, to changes in the space environment. While not decisive, such alignments often mark times of major movement in the solar system. As we continue toward early January, an even rarer event is taking place around January 9. The planets in our solar system reach a near-perfect alignment. We've seen this pattern begin to form since late December, but on January 9, the structure becomes most apparent. Jupiter, the largest planet and most magnetic body in the solar system, aligns with Earth. On the other side of the axis, Mercury, Venus, and Mars form a near-perfect alignment, creating a powerful resonance. Pluto, though slightly off-axis, remains within the structure's sphere of influence, while Saturn and Neptune continue to maintain their long-standing near-perfect alignment. The January 9th conjunction is predicted to be significantly stronger than the November 19-20th configuration. No one can say for sure what will happen, but it is the convergence of 3 different Cazimi cycles, with Mercury, Venus, and Mars, while Jupiter simultaneously enters its annual opposition period, an incredible coincidence of astronomical factors, enough to keep observers closely watching for any developments. Seismic data over the past week shows a series of strong earthquakes centered mainly off the coast of Japan. The latest, a magnitude of 3 quake, occurred at 20 UTC yesterday, indicating that the region remains unstable, although the frequency has decreased slightly. There have been more than 24 earthquakes of magnitude 5, 0 or higher, several magnitude at Vort, Ling, and the largest of magnitude 6, 8, and 6, Ling, coinciding with 3 X-level outbreaks on the 9th, 10th, and 11th. The area remained a high-risk area throughout November, especially with all the activity taking place near the site of the 9.1 magnitude earthquake in 2011. The seismic profile was similar to the period leading up to that earthquake, except there was no magnitude 7 earthquake in 2011. A magnitude 7, 3 earthquake occurred 2 days before the 9. Uno quake coinciding with a spike in solar activity directed at Earth. This surprising repeat has led to the area being monitored even more closely. In particular, most of today's earthquakes are shallow, only about 10 kilometers or even shallower. This increases the risk of seafloor displacement, which could lead to a tsunami if a major fault ruptures. Fortunately, Tokyo is quite far from the current epicenter, but a strong earthquake could still have widespread effects. Therefore, the Japanese region still needs to be closely monitored, especially on November 19 and 20, when an important planetary configuration involving the moon will appear, which could add further resonance to an area that has been very sensitive over the past few days. The moon is a force that influences earthquake activity, but not the biggest force, but they showed that the lunar phase, especially the full moon and the new moon, causes about a 0.5 to 1% increase in earthquakes. But they also showed that the large magnitude earthquakes seem to be concentrated around the time of the new moon or the full moon. So this makes sense in a way that when you have the moon aligned with the sun, that's when you have stronger tides, which are ocean tides and earth tides. The vertical displacement of the earth creates stress and increases cracking in the fault zones. That's how it works. And then a big geologic storm comes and changes the flow of energy around our planet. In the next few months, we'll have a multi-band radiation belt structure. In about 2 months, we'll have 2 radiation belts. We'll start to form a 3rd and a 4th belt very soon, because that's the powerful impact of a solar storm. You know, we don't really understand how that affects the geophysical aspects of the interior, but we do know that there's a connection between the space environment, the atmospheric environment, and the lithosphere environment, the crust, the mantle, and the core. So there's a lot going on right now. It's good to be aware of that. With the radiation belts expected to increase from 2 to 3 or 4 in the coming months, it's hard not to wonder if we're witnessing a rare natural cycle or a cosmic energy reconfiguration of Earth. The changes from space to the atmosphere, down to the core and mantle, add to the mystery as if there's a hidden mechanism behind all the events. Are these just coincidences or signals of a larger energy cycle that humanity has yet to decipher? If you want to continue following these strange things, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any important updates. We have a lot to discover